They call it auto da fe for a reason. It means an act of faith. In the old world, it was a public ritual of penance, a grand, terrifying spectacle of fire designed to burn away the lies of a sinner and purify the soul through agony. It was theatrical, it was brutal, and above all, it was final. In the modern world, we've traded the wooden stakes and the town squares for something far more efficient. We don't need torches when we have the press. We don't need executioners when we have a viral headline. And we certainly don't need dry wood, because the truth is infinitely more flammable than oak. My name is Elias Thorne. 6 months ago, I was a ghost. I was a statistical error, buried in a damp basement, drafting the dreams of others while my own life bled out into the margins of a blank page. For 10 years, I was the silent partner in my own marriage, the man in the cellar writing the bestsellers that made my wife, Julianne, a literary icon. Today, I am no longer the victim. Today, I am the man holding the match. Julianne is already behind bars. Her 15-year sentence is just a series of long, empty paragraphs she'll have to read in the suffocating silence of a concrete cell. But Julianne was just a puppet, a glamorous porcelain mask that smiled for the cameras and signed my words with her name. Every puppet has a master who pulls the strings, and for a decade those strings were held by Arthur Sterling. Arthur, the Kingmaker, the man who looks at a masterpiece and only sees the profit margin. He didn't just know I was writing those books in captivity. He was the one who calculated exactly how much my brilliance was worth, provided I remained dead to the world. He sold my soul dollar by dollar, word by word. So I decided to write his ending. I remember a night in the dead of winter. The heater in my office, if you can call a cage with bookshelves an office, had died 3 days prior. The air was so thick with frost I could see my own breath every time I exhaled an idea. My fingers were so numb I could barely type the climax of The Silent Widow. The pain of early onset arthritis was my only companion, aside from the rats scratching behind the drywall. Then Arthur came down. I always knew he was coming by the scent of his pipe tobacco, a blend of cherry and decadence that cut through the smell of basement mold. He stood there, impeccable in a three-piece charcoal suit, polishing his glasses with a silk cloth that cost more than my monthly allowance for food. He didn't look at me as a man. He looked at me as a foreman looks at a printing press that's starting to grind its gears. "Julianne says you're falling behind, Elias," he said. His voice was like a dry leaf skittering across a tombstone. No emotion, no warmth, just a technical observation. "Remember our arrangement? You provide the brilliance, she provides the mask. It's a perfect symbiosis. But if the ink stops flowing, the basement door stays locked from the outside, permanently. Do you understand the narrative, Elias? An author who doesn't write is an author who doesn't exist." He knew she was stealing my identity page by page. He knew that while he was sipping vintage scotch at his private club, I was injecting myself with caffeine and desperation just to keep the lights on. Arthur didn't just edit my words, he edited my humanity until there was nothing left but a mechanism for prose. But Arthur made a classic mistake, the kind of mistake a second-rate villain makes in the very novels he looked down upon. He assumed that a man who has spent 10 years designing perfect murders, plotting unbreakable alibis, and studying the anatomy of guilt wouldn't eventually decide to draft a script for his own life. Vanity is a silent disease. Arthur believes he is too smart to be caught in the same trap as Julianne. He thinks she fell because she was emotional, because she was careless. He believes himself to be made of ice and logic. I spent the last month in my new office. It's different from the old one. This one has floor-to-ceiling windows that look out over the city skyline. The sun comes in without asking permission, but I haven't been writing a novel. I've been writing a wolf trap. I sent Arthur a manuscript. I did it anonymously through an encrypted email and a courier who doesn't ask questions. I presented it as a lost masterpiece from a deceased author he represented decades ago. I knew his greed wouldn't let him pass it up. I knew his eyes would ignite at the prospect of a posthumous discovery that would cement his legacy as the greatest literary agent in history. I titled it The Weight of Gold. I watched from the shadows as he took the bait. In less than a week, Arthur announced the publication. He didn't verify the source. He didn't question the provenance. In his arrogance, he told the press he had discovered the manuscript himself in an old trunk in the agency's archives. He called it the discovery of the century. Poor, poor Arthur. He was so busy tasting the anticipated glory that he didn't notice the anagrams hidden in the text. He didn't notice that the names of the minor characters, when read a certain way, formed the coordinates of the offshore accounts where he hid the money he stole from his authors. He didn't realize that the plot of the book, ostensibly a 1980s financial thriller, is actually a precise step-by-step confession of his own tax crimes and bribery of the censorship board. He is so hungry for the spotlight that he is walking onto the stage, never noticing that the floor is soaked in gasoline and I am the one with the matches. The book launch was tonight. The Royal Library was once again a cathedral of fine wood, ancient knowledge, and a hypocrisy so thick you could cut it with a knife. Everyone was there, the literary elite, the critics who used to ignore me, and the vultures who live on the scraps of other people's creativity. Arthur stood on the podium. He looked like a king. He adjusted the microphone, flashed a practice smile at the cameras, and opened the book to read the first chapter, the chapter I wrote specifically for this moment. The truth, Arthur began in his velvet voice, is a debt that is always collected with interest. But as he began to speak, something changed. The giant screens behind him, which were supposed to show the cover art of The Weight of Gold, flickered. They didn't show graphics. They showed bank transfer records. They showed the emails he sent to Julianne where he told her to dispose of the liability in the basement if the manuscript wasn't ready by the book fair. The silence that fell over the room was heavier than any tombstone. I watched from the balcony, hidden in the shadows, holding a glass of the same Cabernet Julianne used to drug me and keep me docile. I saw his face. I saw the exact moment the mask fused with the flesh and then shattered. I saw his eyes darting for an exit, finding only the lenses of the cameras that were now recording his ruin in real time. He saw my silhouette on the balcony. For a heartbeat, our eyes locked. In that second, Arthur Sterling realized that the ghost wasn't just haunting his house. The ghost was the one holding the pen that had just signed his death warrant. Arthur Sterling is currently in a cell 3 doors down from my dear wife. I like to imagine they can hear each other's screams at night. The Kingmaker has finally met his editor, and I must say, my proofreading was relentless. I told you before, I still have a lot of ink left in my pen. You see, the police found Marcus's body 2 days after Julianne's arrest. Marcus, the lover. She used to make me feel like I was nothing. They ruled it a suicide, a man tormented by guilt who couldn't handle the weight of his secrets. Tragic, isn't it? But grief is such a convenient plot device, almost as convenient as a suicide note written in a handwriting so perfect that no one can distinguish it from his own. Justice is a beautiful story, full of redemption and satisfying endings, but any good writer knows that readers love conflict, and a sequel is always bloodier than the original. Welcome back to The Last Witness. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, because I am currently drafting Chapter 3, and you might want to check the fine print of your life. Check the footnotes. Look closely at who is walking behind you on a moonless night, because your name might just be in the margins of my next page. I'll be seeing you very soon. After all, I know where you live. I wrote the script, remember?